cover-up on this thing down at the police department.
Yeah.
What do you think the purpose of the cover-up is?
What
is it you think they're trying to cover up?
What I think it is a lot of involvement that they was involved with Berdella to that program that started back in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what I think.
The crime watch thing.
I think it was sending kids along.
Just certain cops you're talking about.
I think it was a program that they started, and they were working with Bob. Bob had a lot of influence.
Oh, really? You think they had a,
definitely. We know they did.
They were working with him, he was supposed to be rehabilitating him or something?
Yeah, that's exactly what went on. They were sent to the court to Bob Berdella. Sure was. I've been telling that for I don't know how long.
Now, I'll tell you what, I might be able to find something out for you.
Well, I got a lot of the kids' names. I had several tell me. Bob helped that above their heads. Some of them lived out. The one that he sued. That one kid he sued lived down the street with the Mexican there for a little while. He was talking to me pretty good there for quite a while, and Bob sued him. And because what happened was he was on parole. Now, I don't know if he was paroled to Bob. I didn't ask that, but he was on parole. Bob did a parole officer. And the kid got his income tax check back, and Bob told him he wanted an income tax check. The kid told him, no, I ain't giving it to you. And he said, well, you owe me for rent and labor and or rent and heat and stuff around here. The kid said, well, I ain't right. I cleaned up the dog shit, I cleaned the yard, the done shit. The kid didn't want to do it to him, so he did. We got Bob said, well, I'm going to get you parole, Bob. I'm going to call you parole officer. He told him to go ahead and do it. He started being security to get Bob laid over. And then Bob went ahead and put a lawsuit against him. And I think he won the lawsuit on that kid, but then he dropped it.
That's damn interesting.
That was after I talked to the kid, and the kid, I never get to talk to the kid no more.
See, I've got an ex-wife who used to be an investigator for the juvenile court.
I tried, but you got to look under Hyde Park Youth Court, what it was under.
Hyde Park Youth Court.
Yeah, I found letterheads. I go back to you. I had all kinds of letterheads and shit in the trash, which I give to Kansas City Police Department. It's still Hyde Park Youth Court, and it was at Bob's address.
You say court, you mean C-O-R-P-S?
Exactly, yeah. That's what it said, Hyde Park Youth Court.
It was pretty odd. I mean, number one, it was Easter weekend. It was on the Saturday before Easter, so not something you were particularly looking for to happen. It was in the middle of the NCAA Final Four, which was in Kansas City that year, and it was in the middle of my re-election. It played into my re-election because the person who ran against me that year kept bringing up the case and using it in the campaign against me. I think it kind of backfired on her, but it became part of the campaign nevertheless. So the timing of it was truly unusual.
I would love to see him executed. I think what he did is abominable. There is no way to minimize the atrocity of what he did, regardless of what his demeanor is in the interview. You cannot minimize the inhumanity that this guy committed on other people.
We got woken up yesterday at the crack of dawn with the sound of heavy machinery digging in the yard next door, and we thought, what the heck is going on? And then it came out in the news that day that they had found skeletal remains buried in the backyard of our neighbor, Bob Berdella.
I don't know, he seemed like a good enough neighbor. He was a quiet guy, but I can tell you from everyone I've talked to, he just always smelled really bad.
I had met Bob before. I knew Al Reeder, who was the prosecuting attorney. I contacted Al Reeder and said, Al, can I be of help? You know, this is something that I'm concerned about. I was particularly concerned with the attitude the city took. A lot of laughing, a lot of Berdella jokes, making fun of what he had done, which was one of the worst crimes I'd ever seen in this city or that anybody could possibly do. And I felt that something had to be done to call attention to the seriousness of the crime and to deal with it, to respond to it. And so my role initially was to approach Al, said, if I can be of help, let me know. He said, okay, Bob is sort of suicidal. We want to keep him alive. We want to understand what happened. We'll have you visit him once or twice a week, but you have to keep it quiet. We'll put you in the back door of the jail. We won't tell anybody you're visiting because you'll probably have some death threats if anybody knows you're coming in.
My initial thought was that it was a couple of homosexuals that had probably had a lover's quarrel, and that it would play itself out like many other cases do that start out in a similar nature.
The bedroom was typical bed, kind of a tall dresser sort of a situation. But as we examined the bedroom, we found that one wall actually was on a pivot and opened up to a second concealed bedroom. And in that room was a metal framed bed. There were tie points at all four corners of the bed, and it was apparent that it was specifically set up to restrain someone.
I was in charge of the fugitive apprehension that handled missing persons, and at the time there were 2 missing persons reports filed, In both those missing persons reports, the common denominator at that time was Bob Berdella.
I was the courts reporter, Jackson County Courts, for the Kansas City Times. And so heard the announcement. I knew it was going to be coming up on my beat. Tom Jackman was cops, I was courts. It was pretty much our ball game.
Yeah, I was 15, 16 years old. I had my first girlfriend. We'd go to Bob's Bazaar on the weekends. She bought me my first ring there, I believe. I thought it was pretty cool. We thought Bob was cool. We were young and dumb, but he seemed exotic. He seemed like some sort of world traveler, eclectic. I'd see his masks and his jewelry, and I'd think Bombay, I'd think Africa, and I guess that's not the story, is it?
They were young, white males who we suspect most of them were involved in male prostitution. We don't know that about all of them, but clearly they were, particularly the ones he picked up off of the street, were some of those were involved in male prostitution. What's interesting to me is that with respect to all of these people, he turned what he saw as a slight against himself into a vendetta against the individual, a vendetta so terrible that it was worth killing for. And it was clear from the confession that he had sexual designs on all of these people.
That this was a biggie was when we dug the head up out of the backyard on Easter Sunday. That's when it really first hit me, and I knew then that we had a major investigation on our hands, and I probably was going to be in the middle of it.
The way I got involved with Bob Berdella is I'd done a lot of investigative reporting for national magazines, including a book called Assassination in America, and I was local. So they were looking for someone with a criminal background, knew how to ask questions, do that sort of thing, and I was contacted and conducted a whole bunch of audio interviews with Berdella in the Jackson County Jail as preparation for the video interview that we eventually did with him.
I was driving to my flower shop the morning he had been arrested, or at least that the story came out, and I heard that he had been arrested for some really hideous crimes, and I don't remember how much I heard at the time, and I was really shocked. It was my first thought was that the cops are just out to get another gay man. I had been gay bashed a few years previously, and when I went to press charges, the cops told me that I would either, if I pressed charges, I would be arrested for having propositioned this man. So I had to let the man go in order to myself not be prosecuted for homosexual activity. Just all I had done was propositioned him. And so when I heard about Bob Berdella, my first thought was, from knowing him and from talking with him and everything, this could not be. This just simply could not be. They're just out to frame another gay man, and that's all it was.
Bob would make these appointments for these boys that he had been made the court guardian for, and they were, supposedly runaway kids, little hustler problem kids, and he was supposedly trying to get them spiffed up so that they could go out and get a job. And so he was supposed to be trying to lead him into doing that. Well, so he'd make appointments Bob would make appointments for the boys' haircuts to be done by my friend Larry, who owned the shop, and then he would make an appointment with me for me to cut his hair. So I would cut Bob's hair, and Larry would cut these, we would say, the little future corpses.
I held his house off and on for about 6 months, and I worked for him at his flea market. He would give me Valiums, and then sometimes I would ask him for them, but most of the time I think he was trying to force them to me, and at that time I did drink and things like that. He never really hurt me that I ever knew of, and he always helped me. There was a picture of me on TV along with a few other men at the time, and the victims.
It was a real dilemma for me because I was listening to these hideous stories about this man and what he had done, and this was the man that I had chatted with in my shop, that we had sat there and talked about all kinds of things and had, like I said earlier, a real kindred spirit going. And so he threw me into a real dilemma, the whole experience, in terms of looking at this man and looking at these horribly villainous acts, and at the same time inside myself knowing that this man was not all bad.
No matter what we told him, he'd want to argue with us. He'd come down. We told him his alternator was out once, and he'd come down. He had to check it out himself, and wanted to argue with us. So after he did that 5 or 6 times, we ran him off. We got tired of listening to his shit. Then I used to run into him. I used to eat up at the flea market up in Westport fairly routinely, and I'd run into his sick ass up there. Found out later on what he was doing to them young kids, and my little brother was in the police academy at the time. So we'd get home on the 6 o'clock news. There's my brother digging for bones and body parts in Berdella's backyard. So I'm glad that sick son of a bitch got what was coming to him.
I had been in Ethiopia the year before, and I'd gone through the camps, and I'd seen the dying children. I'd seen death, I'd seen evil in a social sense, and I had felt that somehow it had a positive impact on me as a person. So I entered into this arrangement with Bob, in which I met with him for an hour, hour and a half, twice a week. And I thought I could handle anything. But I didn't realize the impact. I was not able to eat, not able to have sex, lost weight, became extremely withdrawn because I was dealing with stuff, and then I was told this is stuff you can't tell other people about because it's pretty, it was not the type of stuff you could go out and say, hey, let me tell you about what Bob and I talked about today. You had to keep it under wraps, and that was the agreement. So my wife and I did not talk about it. I didn't realize the impact it was having, except over a period of time, 6 months. So I had gotten down and maybe lost 20 pounds. And it was just sort of a little like a castaway that had fallen on hard times, and it was just skin and bones.
After Berdella went to prison, I got an interview with him. They put me in this little tiny room with him. I asked them to take the handcuffs off. I'm not sure why, but I did. He didn't seem very threatening at that point, It was like all the air had been let out of him. His condition was that I bring 2 tape recorders, one to tape the interview for myself, one to give him a tape. I had asked him, how he got by with some of this stuff, because there were plenty of indications that there were some nasty things going on in Berdella's house. He told me that there were some judges who would send people to him, and that he often bonded people out, and that for a while the parole board had considered him someone where they could send troubled youth and young adults. I was recording the conversation. After I left, the tapes were confiscated, and the warden called me and informed me that something was wrong with my tape recorder because they couldn't get the tape to play after they'd confiscated it. I went to interview Marcia Walsh. She'd just gotten back from a trip to the Arctic Circle where she had been saving baby seals. She really couldn't tell me much about why she thought that Berdella was a drug counselor or that sort of thing. I was very suspicious about the landfill as putting the bodies out with the trash. It just didn't sound in character, not to mention the problems that would cause. How secure is that, to put a body out on your curb in a plastic bag? You wrap stuff up and put it out on the curb, you never know whether it's going to be torn apart by dogs or hit by a car. That's... He seems like a more careful person to me than that.
I believe it was the police department they called and said that they needed us. They needed us to appraise a piece of residential property that I can't tell us what it is, but they'll have a car there in 5 minutes to pick us up. We had no idea where we were going, what we were doing. We ended up at Bob Berdella's house. Dining room had some weird stuff in there, coffee table with some weird pictures on it, and screaming faces, that sort of thing. Vicious dogs in cages right outside the back door. Huge dog kennels, chain link fence kennels. They weren't little dog runs for spot, to run through. These were secured enclosures. They were not couch potato dogs. These were huge dogs. The kitchen was really strange. A couple big stainless steel commercial tables. First, you figure the guy could have been a chef at a restaurant, an owner. I didn't, I knew of Bob Berdella, but didn't know, nobody knew this stuff. So you thought, okay, he's got dinner parties, caters, who knows what. But then you look around and it just wasn't right. It wasn't a normal kitchen. It wasn't a kitchen you're going to entertain in. Some of the stainless steel tables had, built-in sinks and huge garbage disposal. It was a large. Never seen a garbage disposal that large. What the hell else is he going to do with it? He's not going to grind up lettuce in that thing.
Should stop having all those attractive little boys down there tempting me. Or, it was like nothing had anything to do with his, he had no responsibility in it at all. It was just like, well, it's like, hey, I was on a diet, but you kept shoving food down my throat. It's like, oh, okay. They should stop having all those attractive little boys down there tempting me. Or, it was like nothing had anything to do with his, he had no responsibility in it at all. It was just like, well, it's like, hey, I was on a diet, but you kept shoving food down my throat. It was like, oh, okay.
That question was always there, and I was always being asked that. I have no specific information that they were other victims. There could have been, at times I had some thoughts that might have been, but Bob certainly never indicated that he had misled anyone in his testimony.
Personally, I believe there were only 6 victims. A lot of people disagree with that. I think one of the things that convinces me is the fact that Berdella had already cut a deal, so his punishment was not going to be any different if it were 6 or 60.
When you look at the research on serial killers, they don't kill fewer people over time. They go up, and he went down. I also thought it was odd that they would find 2 skulls. Like I say, he's a collector. He collects everything. If you look at those search warrants, this man didn't throw anything away. So why would you keep 2 skulls and then just load every bit of every other body up and put it out on the curb for the trash to pick up? I don't think I can accept that.
In a sense, he was killed by the prison system. I don't make those kind of judgments, and it would be like a death sentence that the prison system probably took on instead of the judicial system. But I wouldn't say that was fitting. According to his parents, his mom, they withheld medication, and he died of a heart attack. So the question was put to me by several people who Bob had told he was going to give the complete story to and were visiting him in prison and didn't give the complete story to, called me and asked me if I would lead an effort to call for an investigation and to condemn the prison system for their lack of responsiveness to Bob's medication. I did not do that. It was not something at that time I was willing to do, to take on the role of challenging the prison system, because I could understand in some ways how Bob got himself in that situation. Very demanding, very difficult in terms of trying to make others feel very small, and himself being very important. And I'm just guessing that the guards in the prison system just said, "You're not going to control us," and they withheld the medication. He died. Probably unfortunate, because I don't think he had, in return for his life, given the testimony to our reader and admitted what he'd done, and so that guaranteed him life in prison. And it was not up to us to make those decisions. It should have been done.
What I said was at the time that I thought that even though he wasn't given the death penalty, number one, he would go to prison for the rest of his life, and number two, he'd die in prison a lot sooner than he would if he were executed. In Missouri, it takes us about 10 years to execute somebody. I don't know how long he was in prison, but probably about 6 years before he died. And why I believe that was simply that his behavior was so uncontrollable and was so bad towards anybody, towards everybody that he encountered, that I just assumed that he would do something in jail that would get him killed. Now, he died of a heart attack. Was he murdered? I don't know. He got what he deserved, you know. I don't know how you put an end to all that, but the truth of the matter is, if you go back and look at the facts, that's how he ended up. He ended up getting what he deserved.
It's really too bad that he didn't live longer than he did, because I think he was getting, he was a control freak, and people were losing interest in him. And I think that had he lived, sooner or later he would have given up more information. I don't think he could have helped himself. I think he wanted the attention.
And you know the whole story about how he died in jail? Well, I don't know the whole story. I just know he died of a heart attack. But the story everybody was telling was that he was like, okay, he probably was asking for more potato chips, and he was cussing out some guard, and then he's like, oh, guard, yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we'll be there, and they just let him die. It's like, everybody was like, well, and they had to pay extra. Supposedly, they had to pay extra to keep him isolated. Because everybody would have wanted to have a piece of him. So anyway,
I did not see any attempt of clergy, any attempt of politicians, attorneys, police, to ever try and wrap that up and say, here's what happened, here's what it means, here's what we've learned from it.
I guess I kind of got obsessed with it. I think a lot of us did. Me, the lawyers, the other reporters, everybody. It was difficult to let go of the case. And at a certain point, I just decided that's exactly what I needed to do. So I gathered boxes of documents and notes and tape-recorded interviews. And one day I just took all that, loaded it up in the car, and drove out to the city landfill and dumped it.
When there are pieces of the puzzle, put them together.
Facts don't diminish the myth, because we need the stories, and we even need the stories of the quote-unquote bad people as much as we need the stories of the good people. We need our heroes and we need our villains. And so the myth becomes the real story then, not the facts.
I don't know how he does it, but you get obsessed, and here you are in Hawaii, you flew all the way here to pursue this case for this movie, so I think you can see that it kind of just sort of keeps going.
And I think part of the reason that there was no outrage was because the young men involved were, for the most part, male prostitutes. They were from broken home, they left home, they didn't have a community around them to protest. And so the media and the public in general did not attach the same value to those lives they would if it had been somebody out of an old-line Kansas City blue blood family. If that had been the case, would have been a different response altogether. But because they were prostitutes for the most part, because they were runaways, because they didn't have families with any political clout, not a lot of seriousness, I felt, was attached to the actual crimes.
That's not true. That's not true. The two individuals, they were individuals as far as I'm concerned. They were missing. The common denominator was Bob Berdella. And we tried to go after Bob Berdella. We didn't sit back because these people had some kind of history. We pursued it, and that is a falsehood there. I have never known, just because of their race, sex, their sexual origin, religion, or whatever, to sit back and say, just throw that on the back burner. That has never, ever been done to my knowledge. It was never done while I was there.
I can't think of a thing we would have done any differently. It would have maybe been easier if they had been people of more prominence, because we would have had privy to more relatives and close associates than what we did. Maybe people who would have had more background information on them, because a couple of our victims, we really had no one to turn to as far as trying to find out information from their past.
None of them came from higher up on the socioeconomic scale, I suppose to say. All of them were either from working families.
Get any cooperation from him until after the guilty plea. I think he pled guilty because he was scared of the death penalty. And I think he felt like we were going to go for the death penalty. So as the evidence mounted and we were able to identify two of the skulls, and we had enough to get him indicted for first-degree murder, I think at that point he became fearful of the death penalty, and at that point he started working out a deal with his attorney to let's try to cut a deal to save my life.
It was the decision made by our prosecutor that in order to give the families of these victims closure, that they allowed him to confess to the evidence that we had in hand. So what they got was absolute confessions of the murder of the 6 people that we had in the experiment packets that we had recovered. The question was always, were there more victims? That's a possibility. What we got, though, was closure for the 6 families that we absolutely knew because we had evidence and photographs.
There was myself and 11 detectives, and we worked the case. We didn't work any other case but that one for approximately 3 months. So yes, it was very time-consuming, very labor-intensive, and I was so glad it was over. It had consumed about 8 months of my life, and I was extremely glad when it was over. I was pleased with the plea deal. We didn't have to go to trial. We didn't have to worry about a misstep and him being exonerated, found not guilty on some technicality. So it was a big weight off my shoulders.